Hello everyone, welcome back to Arsenal Pass. It is Hayden here with a brand new series that we're calling the Arsenal Pass Masterclass sessions. This is a new series where we're taking some of the decks that particularly we know very well, but we might get other people involved in this. And we're going to talk you through the key pieces of a particular matchup. In this instance, we're looking at the Dromai Mirror, one of my favorite matchups in Classic Constructed right now. We're going to break it down from all the tips and tricks you need to kind of go after this matchup, how to play it, how to pilot it. Then we're actually going to go through the gameplay from a testing session and look at how to kind of implement these tips and tricks in order to put them into practice when you're playing a game of this particular matchup. In this case, it's going to be the Dromai Mirror. Now, the series is a little bit experimental. We're kind of going to see how it goes. We might change up the format as we go along. So I'd love to get your feedback. Drop in the comments below. Let us know what you think of this kind of video, this kind of, I guess, masterclass, we're calling it, what you think, whether you'd like to see some different aspects to it, different things called out, what you think of the gameplay analysis that we go through. One thing I find when we play these gameplays on Arsenal Pass, we do these commentaries live. We play games, we banter a bit, we talk about the game, talk about the decks, but the focus isn't necessarily fully on the game at that time. And I think piecing this down to two pieces of kind of breaking down these fundamentals, but then going into a gameplay review, I can really dedicate my kind of full attention to the game at the time, but then post, I can dedicate to kind of talking about all the things that we're just going to go over, how to get the most out of that matchup and take it, break it down sort of turn by turn, as opposed to having to think about, life totals and triggers and, conversing in the game state and trying to be, a little bit entertaining at least sometimes. So this series is a little bit different in that regard. It's not about live gameplay. It's about these kind of replay reviews and really breaking down just one matchup in depth. So before we dive straight into it and go through this Dromai Masterclass, this Mirror Match Masterclass, I do want to say, if you're enjoying what we're doing here at Arsenal Pass, make sure to go drop us a like on this video, sub to the channel if you aren't already, of course, and leave a comment. Again, let us know what you think of these videos and what matchups you'd like to see. Now, before we go and look at this replay analysis and go through implementing all the tips and tricks, of course, we've got to talk about what are the fundamentals, what are the things that you should know and be focusing on when it comes to the Dromai Mirror. Right, the first thing when it comes to the Dromai Mirror is how the game is going to go. How are you going to win? Always got to start with how I'm going to win the game and work backwards from there. So in the Dromai Mirror, there's kind of a couple of different ways that the matchup can end up going, or the Dromai Mirror can end up finishing effectively. Now, the first one is that you actually just run your opponent out of Ash. Now, I think with some of the newer builds we're seeing and these kind of like hybrids between big dragons and aggressive redline decks, we're seeing that this can be kind of how games can end a lot of the time, that you can either get up on Ash, and this is why cards like Time Skip is particularly important, I think, in the Mirror. If you win the die roll and get to go first, that card could just be an absolute MVP. Why Necria is, I think, the best dragon in the Mirror, which we'll talk about as we kind of play through the game as well, and we talk about some of the dragons. But you can actually just run your opponent out of Ash. That is a very, very real thing that can happen. Or you can gain such an Ash advantage in the game that you end up just being able to basically start slamming dragons in the in-game without having to worry about the amount of Ash you have, and your opponent can't do the same. You can start popping down Azrael Eyes and Chrome Eyes at will, especially Azrael Eyes that you're going to get back with Remembrance. More on that soon. So yeah, Ash is really important, and you can actually run your opponent down an Ash. Now, the second way is that the game can actually just kind of snowball out of control for one side on the Dromai Mirror. And so you've got to be really cognizant, really careful in thinking about, first of all, making sure it doesn't happen to you. But if the situation arises, to actually kind of like push your advantage and almost snowball onto your opponent. Basically, what happens in this instance is that when dragons start to get played on the board, if you have a bit of an Ash advantage, or maybe your opponent draws a dud hand, or you draw a couple of really good hands in a row that facilitate playing a lot of dragons and presenting a lot of damage, you can actually get to a point where your opponent can't clear your dragons off the board, and then you incrementally add more dragons that they can't clear. So you get to a board state where they just can't come back from, and you just overwhelm them with damage and with your dragons. That can happen. I'd say this one is a bit rarer, especially if the players are both pretty experienced. They know how to clear dragons. I would say against inexperienced opponents, this can happen quite a lot. They might not have the right cards in Arsenal to clear dragons. They might play out the wrong cards at the wrong time and get severely punished for it, and you can kind of just run away with the game and snowball it. Kind of the third way, I guess, that the game can end is it can come down to arcane damage. Cards like Burn Them All, Azrael, of course, so it can come down to arcane damage. I think this is probably the one I've experienced, maybe even the least, that especially if you understand how much arcane damage is relative in the deck and how much they can actually do. Like playing a Burn Them All early comes at a cost of potentially clearing a dragon. So you can't be you have to play them when it's kind of free to do so. And then Azrael in the in-game obviously are going to help you deal that arcane damage. But basically, I think the damage that's kind of presented there, really, to me, it all comes down to more of that Ash and dragon management. And then the arcane damage is kind of like the third thing that I think can happen, but is less common, but is definitely a way that the game can end. And then the fourth one I want to touch on briefly is basically just running your opponent out of threats. This one I've seen happen, but I haven't had this happen to me outside of kind of early games and testing when I think some of the sides of the testing didn't understand quite how the matchup could go. I think this one happens, in my experience, this is the one that happens even less than, I guess, arcane damage being relevant, is that you actually run your opponent out of threats. More likely, they're going to run out of Ash first before they run out of threats. But if they've been really cognizant, blocking a lot to keep their life total high, especially against like attack actions, with more attack actions in these builds, particularly in the build that we're going to see in this gameplay and the build that we play for Nationals, then yeah, that can happen. They can actually just run out of like relevant threats in the in-game. But then usually what will happen is kind of point two. You'll kind of just snowball, and then the game will end pretty quickly because they won't be able to clear your threats because they've run out of things for them to play. They'll start drawing blues and kind of burn the malls and just kind of these dud hands that don't really do anything. So that's kind of the last way that the game can potentially. All right, next up is tips and tricks on playing the game to basically get to some of those in-game states that we talked about. First I'm going to go over is basically how do you get to an Ash advantage. And there's a few things that are really important for this. The main thing is basically not playing dragons out for no value. You actually don't want to play dragons early. You actually want to focus on building Ash stores and just presenting damage and clearing your opponent's dragons ideally. If you start to present dragons, especially onto empty boards, that just allows your opponent to, yeah, maybe take a little bit of damage, but life's not that relevant in this game, and then keep their 5-card hand, clear your dragons with their own dragons, and now have a board presence. You basically lose value on that. And then if you can't clear your board, their dragons, then you are going to fall behind. So you start to play dragons into dragons, etc., which is how the game kind of evolves eventually. But you don't really want to be the first person to play dragons. You want your opponent to play dragons first because, yeah, you'll take some damage off them. That's fine. For life, you're basically trading life to set up your board state. And then you play your dragons, kill their dragons, and now you're basically with the tempo with them on the back foot. So that's kind of one of the ways that you want to make sure you're managing your ashes. Basically not playing dragons early unless you kind of have to. Now, if there's a situation where I'm just going to pass with cards in hand, then yes, I will play dragons. That's a threat that's on board, it's damage to deal with my opponent, and then they're going to have to deal with it. But primarily what I want to do in the early game is play cards like CNC or Miraging Metamorph or even some of the blue 6 attacks to clear their dragons up or just present damage, because life total is going to be relevant at some point, but if I can present damage, force them to either block with cards or take damage while I'm building my Ash stores, and then force them to basically blink first and play their dragons, then that's a position I want to be in. Which kind of leads into the next point, which is how do you get into these positions to, I guess, snowball? And that's basically by doing this, by presenting damage, pushing damage on the board, and then finding these spots to basically clear their dragons with yours. Maybe then they find that they can't clear your dragons, and then you just keep adding. At that point, you realize, you go, okay, they couldn't clear dragons, they left me with like a Yendarai or something. I'm just going to add, a Themai and a Necria this turn, or a Miragai and a Themai. Now on that, there's a couple of key callouts I want to make about some of the key cards in this matchup and how you should play them. The first thing is that dragons with 4 toughness are really, really good because they're really hard to clear. They basically mean that they can't clear them with like their own dragons unless they have a Kai'Lora. They can't clear a Themai with their own Themai. They can't clear a Yendarai with their own Yendarai. And they can't clear, like Uvir and these sorts of things without either attacks like Dust Up, Grapple, Snatch, CNC, Miraging Metamorph, etc. Then they're committing those to your dragons, which is great. Or they have to double attack. Or they have to commit a card like Rake and Azraeli. And that's going to lead me on to the next point, which is don't play your Rakes and Azraelis. You don't want to be the first person to play a Rake, because basically one of the game plans in the Dromai Mirror is hold a Rake or an Azraeli in your arsenal, kind of cycle them through your deck, so that when your opponent does it first, you get to punish them. We talked about not playing dragons first. But you also don't want to be the person to play Rake first, because they play a Rake, you play an Azraeli, you get a 1 card to clear up, and they're now Ash negative on that. Yeah, you spent 1 Ash to play your Azraeli, but you've got an Azraeli in play, you've cleared up their Rake, and they spent effectively like 2 Ash because it's 2 cards to play it. So now, and also you've taken a Rake out of the deck, and you're ahead on that kind of tempo, or basically total cards, or relevant cards in deck anyway. So Azraeli and Rakes are really important. You don't want to be the first to play them, but sometimes you're going to find yourself in spots to do it, or they're going to be too far ahead on the board. Often, sometimes you'll find like, I just have to play this Azraeli here to ensure that I can kill the Yendarai, for instance, on this turn. Or even a Rake in some situations. But Rake and Azraeli management is really important. When it comes to the remembrances in our deck, these are effectively what the targets are going to be. Into the sort of mid to late game, you're going to be targeting Azraelis and Rakes, get back all this value, go wide on the board with Rakes. And this is why I find that often like 3 remembrance versus 2 remembrance. So if you have 3 and they have 2, you can actually just outvalue them in the in game, because you just get back whatever you need. So if they have a bunch of Rakes left in the deck, you get Azraelis. Usually Azraelis the first thing because it's so powerful and it's a bit more Ash efficient. But if they're out of Azraelis, for instance, like, well, now my Rakes is so hard for them to kill, I can get back a Rake with remembrance. So those are kind of the key things to remember in this matchup. Those are some of the most important things. And then the kind of last thing really is just how to utilize your arsenal. Now, one of the kind of tempting things is to be like, well, I'll just put my big payoff cards like Dominia or Tomultai into my graveyard. Tomultai is kind of a trap, to be honest. You really can't play a Tomultai out if they've got dragons on the board and not clear their dragons. Like, you have to point them at their dragons. And that is not 5 resources for this dragon that's just clearing out their dragons and then probably going to die. Is not efficient. The only time Tomultai is particularly good is when you've been trading sort of damage back and forth. Maybe you cleared their board and then they clear your board with like attack actions rather than dragons and don't develop the board. And then you just get this free turn to Tomultai and take their Furnace. Like, it is super relevant to kill Furnace, but you can never leave your opponent with dragons on the side of the board. So that's kind of the other tip, is you've got to clear dragons at all times. Which leads us to how to use the arsenal. So you want to use your arsenal for some of the things we talked about earlier. So an Azrael or a Rake to counter what they're going to do. But if you think your opponent's going to be on the same kind of level as you and understand this game plan, they're not going to do that. They're going to pitch their Rakes and Azraelites and also hold something relevant in Arsenal. Yeah, what I like to use Arsenals for a lot of the time is these big attacks. You're going to be able to kill the 2 sort of hardest to kill dragons in the matchup, which is Uvia and Necria. And I also think Necria is the most important dragon in the early game for building Ash stores and building Ash advantage. And you don't want to be giving them more Ash by killing that with multiple sort of attacks. Also, that's just card disadvantage. What you want to do is throw like your blue Embermaw Centipie or Enigma Chimera at it, or even a CNC or a Mirage Metamorph or an E-Strike. 2 cards in hand after their turn, they have a Necria on board. E-Strike for 5, draw a card after they've dealt damage and already have a counter on Necria is such a great play. So yeah, these are the kind of things I want to do. So I'll be putting cards like E-Strike in my arsenal. I'll be putting cards like Dust Up in there. I'll put attack actions in there. Preferably not the blue ones in CNC, because I want to use the CNC to pop, and I want to use the blue ones for resources, or not have to have 2 resources to be able to play it. And then the other thing after that is I will use it for, of course, Azraelites, Rakes like we talked about, and Kyloria even, because Kyloria is great for clearing those 4 toughness dragons, which are so important in this matchup. Now those are kind of the top tips and tricks for the Dromai Mirror matchup. There's so many more I could go through, but we are going to go through a gameplay, and we're going to kind of break down the game as we go, and more of, the examples we just talked about are definitely going to come up. More things are going to come up in the gameplay, so make sure you stick around for that. Again, let us know what you think of the gameplay, and is it beneficial hearing these tips and tricks and then seeing them in action. Here we are on the Teleshar gameplay page. Now, I want to give a big shout out to my testing partner, or my testing buddy, good friend, Dan Mackay, who was kind enough, off the back of his Nationals top 8 in New Zealand as well, to agree to play some mirrors with me so I could record some games. So this is a game from our testing that you're going to see right here, myself and Dan, who have been playing a lot of Dromai recently. Playing pretty similar lists. I think he's playing the exact list he played at Nationals. I'm playing a slightly changed list. The deck list is down in the comments below. 1 card different to my Nationals list, actually. It's just the extra blue 6 attack over the Warmongers, which, if you haven't seen the deck tech already and you want to know more about this deck list, go and check out our deck tech. The link is also down below, and you can find out kind of the reasoning behind this deck list and how it kind of came about for Nationals. But one of the changes I said I would make is I would cut the Warmongers with the 6 blue, 6 power attack action there. I think it's so good in the mirror, and overall just a great card, especially on early turns to build up Ash. I just think it's a better payoff than some of the blues that you can play, although I do think some of the blues are more relevant in certain matchups. Talk about sideboard quickly as well. So the way I approach sideboarding in this matchup is basically, blues are pretty bad. Like I talked about before, Tomultai and even to an extent Dominia being a little bit trappy, right? Like they would seem super important when you first go, because you go, well, if I kill their Furnace, like that's crazy. But the way that the game plays out, you literally cannot leave dragons on the board. So Tomultai is such, it's an opportunity card basically, but it's not a setup card, is how I would say it. So I'm cutting down to kind of minimal blues, really. So there's 10 in the list, kind of 9 in the main deck, but all the passing Mirages are coming out. That card is just garbage in this matchup. It does nothing. Even if they play more than 3 poppers, which I don't think they can afford to, you're just going to outvalue them because they've got these bad cards in the deck. So cut the passing Mirages. The other cards that come out are basically all of our defense reactions. So the 2 Oasis, the 3 Fate for Scene, but we do leave 1 Sink in, just basically because it's red. You do have to attack, especially with more attack actions in the builds now. To point attack actions at face and use your dragons to clear dragons. So you can get value out of the Sink below. Even into the more aggressive red line versions, I'd play 2 Sink all the time. Although you just be careful about having dead cards in your deck. And then we take out the flicker tricks, of course, as well. So that's kind of what the list looks like. We're playing all the dragons, and then we keep all of the attack actions in, basically. So we'll kind of get into the game. I'll click go, and then we'll go through. I think I'm just clicking through here, looking at my sideboarding in case I wanted to talk about it for the gameplay review. Of course, Time Snap Potion, that's the blue that's out as well, the 10th blue. Of course, all the Remembrance in going to be super important. And then all the defense reactions out. Everything else is kind of standard. Yeah, the Sink below is kind of the last card, really, that plays in the matchup. So I did lose the die roll. Well, it says I won here, but Dan originally won the die roll. So I made sure that he got to still go first. So you're going to see him present the time skippers, which is such a great advantage in this matchup. Because your opponent on turn 0 is going to get 1 ash, you're going to get 3, hopefully. We'll see in a second. And the Arsenal card. And yes, they get to attack first, but developing the board isn't good. Like, the first opportunity to develop the board we talked about isn't actually that good. Attacking is what you want to do. It looks like, unfortunately, Dan had a pretty bad opener here and isn't going to get to leverage the time skippers, so we won't see the absolute strength. But I can attest in my mirrors that I played at Nationals, where I actually got to go first in all my mirrors, which is great, and time skippers, which is a massive MVP. So I'm just going to double block here with Moragai and Sweeping Blow. I think these are the two worst cards in my hand. Obviously can't block with Remembrance, and I want the E-Strike because I want to present damage. Well, actually, I'm going to pitch it anyway, but I want it in my deck for later because I want to present damage. Moragai is fine as a 4 toughness thing, and Sweeping Blow is fine for developing Ash, but I want cards like E-Strike later on in the game. So put this on the bottom from the op because it's a dragon. We don't want to be playing dragons. I want to draw attacks off of this. Don't want to be developing the board particularly. We get our Ash and we kind of move on with things. Would have liked to have got rid of this Remembrance, but what's the way to do so? And then we do draw 2 cards that we don't particularly want to play. Break the Embers, Kyloria, and then we have the Ravenous Rebels. Ravenous Rebels is great because we can point that at their face and just damage. So we just present the damage here and see what's on top. Ravenous Rebel reveals a Ravenous Rebel, so that's good for next turn. We know we're going to have an attack. It means that if they develop the board, we have an attack to clear up, or we just have an attack to present damage. 0-4 is hopefully 0-4 is where we want to be. So Dan opting to keep his 5-card hand here. I mean, he has no Ash, so I guess he kind of has to keep stuff to try and do something on his turn. So it kind of makes me think, well, developing a Kyloria here probably isn't the worst. The real decision is, I don't want to Arsenal this Remembrance, even though I could crown it away, which is often what you're using your crown for, to sort out awkward hands or, get value off of an awkward card. You have to put usually Remembrance on first cycle. But my kind of thought here is, well, if I just kind of play the Kyloria here, I go down on Ash, but also Dan isn't ahead on me on Ash, so I'm not losing Ash economy. And then Dan probably has to block with a card here, and also loses Spectral Shield. Or if he doesn't, then that's fine. He gets his hand, and I get to draw a card. Hopefully, I can draw, maybe like a 0 cost. Oh, I draw the Rebel. Sorry, I know I'm drawing the Rebel, so I can just present more damage at him. So he's kind of pretty incentivized to block here, or at least taking 4 damage off the back of this. But yeah, we see it. You kind of see the power of Wave here. So people play Null Rune Gloves. I honestly just have not found Null Rune Gloves relevant. I talked about Arcane Damage not being particularly relevant, and honestly, I don't think it is. Also, you have to be afforded to pitch to it. The 2 damage that Wave rarely stops, and particularly breakpoints early on when the board is empty and you're just throwing attacks into each other, things like Dust Up, Ravenous Rabble, Snatches, etc. Where you want to be. So back on his turn, we're going to see him again a little bit more awkward. Draws a yellow and a blue, so I think he gets to make 1 Ash here. But presumably gets to set up something in Arsenal to either deal with my board if I set something up here, which is kind of where you want to be. And obviously we now have the Rake in our Arsenal, so not something we want to play, but something that is going to... so yeah, obviously Dan just killing our dragon there, clearing up. But yeah, we have this Rake that we can kind of sit on, and it looks pretty good. Like, we kind of have some good plays here. We can build up Ash on this turn. Throw damage at face. I'm gonna do everything that we want to do. Pretty sure I just need Ravenous Rabble plus the Chimera here. Gets a blue out of my deck. I like to get a couple of blues out of my deck early, so I'm not drawing them late. But they are good for clearing sort of those big dragons as I talked about. Okay, looks like I go with the Sweeping Blow here. Oh, it looks like I'm gonna keep the Ravenous Rabble in my deck and present the Enigma Chimera. Much better play. Yep, I found the line. So this allows me to get that blue out of my deck. Also build Ash with Sweeping Blow, and then keep Ravenous Rabble in my deck for late game. When I know that I'll hit a red off the top, losing the deck, for instance, and I get the damage. So 9 damage and getting 3 Ash, great spot to be. And then yeah, I pass back to Dan on an empty board. I haven't developed anything. So if he had a Tumultai here, for instance, that would be a great time to Tumultai, an empty board. But if he doesn't have attack actions and has to develop a board here, then I've got the Rake to punish him on the way back potentially if he plays his own Rake or something. So he does end up just blocking here to preserve some life. Blocking is fine, especially if it's like with dragons and attacks that you aren't going to play, and then you just present back damage. Again, like kind of not blinking first thing while developing Ash is really good. We'll just keep an eye on Ash as we kind of go. Like, how much Ash are we at? What Ash are they at? Who's kind of winning on the Ash side? So we see Azrael on top, so we know we're not going to play Rake into that next turn. Not that we'd play Rake onto an empty board anyway. But if he played a Rake here, it would mean that we definitely wouldn't play our Rake. We'd play our Azrael, for instance, to clean up and keep the Rake back. what I want to do here. Yeah, Dan, now it's time to try to develop some Ash. So pitching for Furnace just to create Ash, really not where you want to be. But Dan started with some pretty awkward hands and a little bit behind here. Kind of up to us now. I really want to focus here at this point in the game on just like any damage, developing Ash. That's kind of my main focus here. I think I have a decision here. It's like I could play out this Azraelite just for damage here and get something on the board. Honestly, just think that's a bit of a trap. Like, I'm much better off just probably getting the Sigil out of my deck. Getting 6 damage, threatening the Arsenal, getting 2 more Ash, and then Sigilling just to gain 3 life and get the Sigil out of my deck. You don't particularly want to draw these Sigils later. I don't mind keeping like 1 in my deck, maybe 2. Especially, I mean, the thing is like even if they burn them all out, like they know you still have those Sigils. So it's not particularly relevant, but they're not particularly good to be drawing when you're only drawing gas. Shuffle back with Remembrance, you still have 2 or 3 Sigils in your deck, you draw them with other Remembrances and blues, things like that. It's so awkward. So taking this opportunity just to cash it in now for basically free, instead of doing something like Furnace or Ash, where I want to be, I'm pretty good on Ash right now. And I'm doing it in a way that's efficient. I'm presenting damage, getting my Ash. This hand is like kind of okay, but maybe potentially a little bit awkward. But I could break Necria if Dan develops a board here, especially if he commits this Azraelite, or we see him pitch it. And it might give us a little bit of runway to play out this break. But again, it could be just super greedy, gets really punished by it. So always play out your dragons before you attack with them. If you're going to attack face because you want to play around the popper, there's no reason not to. The information that you're going to give your opponent just isn't worth potentially, holding that information back but running into a popper. So Dan lead with Themifist. I think I would lead with Kyloria personally there, because if they're going to pop that, I'd rather them pop Kyloria than Themi, because I have the shield anyway, so it's 1 card either way. Although this does clear the shield, I guess, if I don't block, so maybe this is better. Maybe this is better, actually. Yeah, Dan's probably got this one. Yeah, that's probably a much better play, because now I don't have the Ash. So I'm kind of in a bit of a spot here. It's like, I really am kind of feel like I'm ahead. I'm 5 Ash versus 1 Ash, and I know I want to clear these dragons. So, and I can do that with the Rake and the Necria. But I could Crown here, try and cash something in. So double block with the Crown and the Furnace, ult him back off drawing that card, get good use out of my equipment, and then try and find something that isn't a Rake, basically, and not have to play a Rake in order to double action here effectively to clear up his board. Like, the priority for me has to be clearing his board. And we know that the last card in hand is so, because we saw it with the Rebel last turn. So playing the Rake means we know we're going to get Azraelite. So I think basically the thing I'm thinking about here is like, let's Crown plus Furnace, tuck this Rake away, and find, honestly, just anything. Just a red would allow me to Necria plus Miragai, and clear up his board and leave me with Miragai and Necria, 2 of the hardest to kill dragons. Effectively a 5 toughness dragon with Necria, and a 4 toughness with Miragai. And I get a lot of Ash out of that as well. And it just goes to my game plan. So that's exactly what I end up doing. Traded my equipment here for a pretty good trade. And I'm looking at a line that's going to allow me to, it's going to pitch 2 reds. So effectively go up 1 Ash when all things said and done, that Necria trigger. And then also when he has to kill that Necria, it's going to give me another. All right, back over to our turn. And again, we just make this Azraelite so much more awkward for him. We just know he's not going to get value out of it now. So he can sit on that as long as he wants, but we know it's there. So we don't have to factor it as like an attack action or a Necria or anything like that. We just know that it's the Azraelite. So it's yeah. So yep, exactly that. We'll about the Necria. Say Ash neutral, we like to say. So Ash neutral, when you basically spend an Ash, but you gain an Ash back with the pitch. Say Ash neutral to back first, no reason not to. Gain an Ash off the trigger. And then we'll play the Miragai to clean up the Kyloria, and then pass over to Dan with a 5-card hand. This also kind of forces his hand as well. We know about that Azraelite, so now we can kind of be like, well, I chucked away that Rake. I've now got effectively 9 worth of dragons on the board. Probably going to have to play that Azraelite if he wants to clean up the board here. So kind of force his hand, but it's a good spot to be in. And then also be up on Ash. The kind of scary thing is going without an Arsenal here. Like, I really like to be able to hold an Arsenal with a clearer. So I said before about, yes, Rakes and Azraelites for sure, because they're great answers to Rakes, but also just ways to clean up dragons. So those 4 power attacks, for instance, are great. Mirage Minimal is a card I love to put in Arsenal. Same with E-Strike, because it can clear up any dragon. Then pitching Burn Them All. And yeah, as I say, not particularly good in this matchup. It can be great in spots and it can do a lot of work, but so hard to be able to actually play it. So hand's pretty good here. He's forced to just clean up dragons on our turn. Then that means that we get to play 2 cards to clean up this side of the board, whether that's a Metamorph plus a Yindarai, or the Yindarai plus a Dust Up, and then Arsenal the Metamorph for a clearer, Sweeping Blow. Like, we have so many options here, and I doubt he's going to be able to actually present me anything relevant. Like, even if he attacked me with like a Dust Up or something, okay, I just take it. Yeah, it gains him an Ash and 4 damage, but so yeah, this looks a bit awkward. So as we said, we're going to probably use the full 5-card hand just to clear these dragons here. We literally had to use a Sweeping Blow and an Azraeli. Kill just the Miraging Metamorph. That 4 toughness is so powerful. And then throwing a Metamorph. And then Necro to kill it. Gets us another Ash. Pass back to our turn. Yes, there's an Azraeli in play, but Dan has 3 Ash. We have 7 Ash, and we have Tempo here. And we want to be. So, I mean, I think I'm inclined just to present damage here and then keep something good in my arsenal. Which, like, I want to have an arsenal. So I think keeping this this Metamorph in my arsenal is a good place to be. So I think either Sweeping Blow or Yindarai. Like, playing the Yindarai here is not the worst because it's hard to kill. And it effectively like gains us life because if they have to kill it. But the other thing that Sweeping Blow does here is kills the Azraeli and develops Ash. And then we can play the Dust Up, forcing damage through, gaining even more Ash, Castling. One thing to note with like the Dust Up is often you don't want to create the Ashwing unless it's going to be basically benefit you to the point where it's going to make it likely that dragon's going to stay on the board because your opponent can't clean everything up nicely. But like, for instance, sometimes it's like, I have 2 Ashwings and this is my 3rd Ashwing. Like, will that just play straight into their Azraeli there? So often just having the Ash later is just better. We do exactly that. We get the Dust Up. We just make the Ashwing in this instance because we have nothing on board. So incentivizing to point an attack at an Ashwing is going to save us some amount of life. So I'm okay to trade an Ash, basically like 3 life minimum sort of thing. Just to point like a Sweeping Blow or a Yindarai or a Dragon at it, for instance. But now he comes to the Rake. Actually, a little bit of an awkward Rake for us here because we don't have the punish for it. This Metamorph and Arsenal is not great for punishing it. So our opponent comes in with 3 Ashwings. But even if I can't clear these this turn, like, he's committed a Rake to the board. So as soon as I can deal with that, as long as it's not 2-3 turns down the track, as long as it is only kind of 2 turns, good use of Furnace there. Gains a Mash and 0.6 damage at us. And then this becomes kind of the decision on like, what's the next turn going to look like? I want to, do I just take 6 here, go to 29, and then develop a Kyloria and point a Miraging Dragon? Because honestly, like, do that. We just play out, Necria here. The awkward thing is, like, we can't use our Furnace for good value here because we have to play, a 1 cost first, and only 1 cost we could play is Kyloria, and then we couldn't play the Necria afterwards anyway. So, or we could literally just pitch all 3 of these cards to Necria, take down a dragon. He's left with 2 dragons, 2 Ashwings, and a full hand. But we've just got so much Ash. Our Ash lead would just be so massive that we could actually start to play a little bit inefficiently with our Ash as the game goes and kind of just use Ash lead to basically build, even though we'll be down on life. Okay, this is exactly what we do here. Just take the 6. I think the view is to just play the Necria. Yes, it's 6 damage, but we're going to end this turn with a Necria on board, and we're going to gain 4 Ash from this turn, 3 from the pitch, 1 playing the Necria. So we're going to be, up to 13 Ash. He's going to get 3 with 2 dragons, and we're going to have a Necria on the board. So our dragons are definitely Necria, and he doesn't have an arsenal to kind of punish us with a 5-card hand. So kind of feels a little bit weird and a bit bad to just take that damage there and pitch, basically use 4 cards. Like, this looks on the surface super inefficient to be like, you just use 4 cards to get a dragon on the board and kill an Ashwing. But I think given what options were present there, none of the other plays were particularly good, and it's a really hard to kill dragon on the table. Leaves us the Miraging Metamorph and Arsenal, and leverages our life pretty well and gives us such a massive Ash lead. And we net 3 Ash on that. And then, we draw into a hand that can kind of do it all. You now have access to Azraeli to clean up his dragons. We have our Metamorph to kill up this Necria that he's just played. And this is going to be a double hit. Like, this is going to require a Necria plus a dragon killing this Necria. So we're getting yet another 2 Ash. So although we took 6 damage, we could use our whole hand to gain 5 life, because in Dennis to attack this with dragons rather than attack us, and gain net, or 5 ash net. So really good spot to be in, actually. It feels a little bit weird to use that whole hand for that play. So Den just clears out with the dragons, attacks us for damage, goes down to 28, we're at 30, and we're back with our 5-card hand. Now we know we need to kill the Necro, of course, and these Ashwings, so it feels like a good time to commit an Azraelite to board, really, clean it up, and then throw a Metamorph at that Necria. And that kind of leaves us with a card, so I guess the option here, and it wasn't worth blocking a card on Ashwing because we can pitch and card to gain an Ash, that's fine. But I guess the thought process thing I'm looking at here is like, well, could I actually just leave myself with no arsenal and just get 5 damage with the E-Strike here? I think on the whole, that's probably not where we're at in this game. I want to prioritize keeping a card in arsenal, I think, and pitch for an Ash. Especially if that means we can, put, what's the best card to have in arsenal? I mean, I want to play all my Necrias as soon as possible and continue to build that Ash advantage. But the best card to have in arsenal right now might be an Azraelite to deal with his Rake, but he's already played one. Playing out the second one would put him in an. So, I can stuff up here with how I activate Azraelite. There we go. So Azraelite cleans up the 2 dragons there and deals 1 arcane damage to him. So always attack the dragon and point the arcane at them so that you don't get done in by the popper. Don't attack them for the extra. Be greedy for that extra 1 damage. Make sure you attack the dragon, point 1 arcane at the other dragon, and then point the 1 at their face. Cleaning up the Necria there. So, and then I don't end up pitching to Furnace, and I think this is kind of an interesting play. I don't know if it's necessarily correct. We get immediately paid off for it because we get to keep. I end up keeping the E-Strike. My thought is basically it's like a safe play. I keep the E-Strike in case he plays a big dragon like a Necria or an Uvia, and I keep the Azraelite in case he plays a Rake, for instance. So like I have the best of both worlds, and I think he's kind of maybe he's falling behind now. He just kind of has to play a Rake to start to try and gain advantage. So like my 1 Ash versus he just having answers to play. Worth giving up the 1 Ash. So that's the play I made in the end. So super contextual, these mirror games, for sure. I think the obvious play would have been to just pitch to gain an Ash on that turn, but I have the answers to anything he could do. We have the CNC here, and we could obviously pop Ashwings, but I'd rather just take the life here. My Azraelite's going to clean them up anyway, and then I can either point the CNC at him after playing that, or better yet, when he commits the last dragon to the board, something like this, I can immediately pop this. There's no reason to just like end the turn, just serve your life, especially when I'm still at around parity at 30 life-ish and have all this Ash advantage. Make sure he can't get any advantage from a good dragon like this. Trade 1 card for one dragon, which is a great spot to be in. Burn them all's out now, so like I said, I can damage, honestly, doesn't really seem that relevant to me. You often just have to play Burn them all out when it's free to do so, and isn't going to hurt you. Dan could have kept a different card there for Arsenal potentially. Could have pitched for Ash, which might be an argument. Although he's at 4 Ash right now. But sometimes you just want to get the minimal out. Just get the damage off of it. Like if you get it to 5-6 counters, like you get 5-6 damage off of it. So it's a 1 card 5-6 damage. My kind of view on it is you just play it when it's best to do so during the game. Not turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. You don't have enough cards in graveyard. But just play it out kind of in the mid game. You're just going to get the damage off of it. You might as well just play it out when it's best to do so, when it makes the most sense for you, almost free. Like you're giving up no opportunity cost to play it. Rather than, I'll pitch it for later and use it for the in-game. Play it. Play it and get the damage off of it. And especially if they're playing Norrin, play it. Because then there's time to pitch cards to it, which they just can't afford to be doing. And if they are, they're probably going to lose. So go ahead here and play the Dromai out. Obviously, because I lost the CNC, it kind of narrows down my turn a little bit. I have less cards. What my thought process was here. I think I probably end up E-striking to draw a card, just being a little bit greedy. Which, to be honest, if that's my play, I should have done that first with the extra action point that I have because of the Dromai hitting. Didn't pop it or anything. Rather than play the Azraelite first. Just because it's just less information, but it doesn't matter. Clean up the dragons here. Azraelite cleans up the dragons, and then we do go into this E-Strike draw card. In drive the card, which is obviously a very good hit. More than happy to have that in Arsenal. But I should just play the E-Strike first, just better sequencing. Because now he's seen the Azraelite, knows I'm not doing anything else afterwards. So Chroma comes down for him plus another dragon. So now in a position where let's just do a bit of a check-in on the game. We're at 12 Ash. We have 2 dragons on the board. We're at 27 life. We actually have a little bit of life lead. And we're... Look at graveyard space. Played a Rake, played an Azraeli. We've played 1 Azraeli at the stage, I think. So, we're kind of up on that count as well. And yes, there's a bit more out. A lot about that, to be honest. He's got Furnace on 2 still, which is relevant. But now we're seeing, he's having to commit. He's not able to build Ash stores on turns like this because he's play a card like a Dromai, actually put threats on the board. Now, there's an argument maybe here for not playing the Dromai and just throwing the Ravenous Rabble at the Dromai, but it doesn't gain Ash, and I think the thought from the side is, well, now you have to deal with this, which to be honest is true. Like when you're a little bit behind, sometimes you have to make plays like this. So I like to just kind of focus on those Chromais for late game. So when you build up this massive Ash store, you can just start to slap dragons on the board so efficiently. Back to Auto now, so we know we need to clear out these 2 dragons. Now, you see the power of the 4 toughness on Themai here. Like, we'd have to point 2 things at this. But, we've gotten lucky. We've got the Kyloria. But if we didn't have this Kyloria here, we'd probably end up having to play the, like the Emma Centipede to clean up the Themai, as opposed to playing an extra dragon. Which, and now this way, I get to keep Centipede in my, or a Yindarai in my arsenal for the next turn to then clean up what he's going to use to clean up. So we just continue to hold this arsenal. We keep advantage. We keep a card advantage effectively. We keep an answer or a threat as an advantage on card. We've got to keep playing into what they're doing. And it just mitigates our risk of bricking and potentially getting them back into the game. Because we're in a spot here where we've got the Ash lead. We've got the kind of like the tempo lead. Like we're now clearing their dragons. Especially if we have this extra card that we're holding back. We're a card up. So yep, decided to end up keeping the end. I think my thought here is like, just keep the threat, and I have so many attacks still left in my deck. So even if he plays a big dragon here, like a Necria to clear myself. Like first of all, Yindarai is going to probably need an attack to kill it, to kill Yindarai, and then oh no, I just ended up playing both here. Okay, I mean one gets popped, so it might be like a little bit greedy. Like so, there's this thing of do you play the dragon or do you hold the dragon back so that you have an answer to basically what they're going to do? But I think the reason for keeping or playing the Yindarai basically is that it's so hard to kill. Like I wouldn't play a 0-cost dragon there, for instance, because it doesn't require resources next turn. Whereas the Yindarai requires the resources that I have available this turn, and it's hard to kill. I probably wouldn't play a Kyloria there either, actually. Maybe. I would like to keep a card in Arsenal. Possible. Because yeah, like hands like this that are super awkward, where we can only do one thing. Really bad. So if we had the Yindarai in Arsenal here, this turn would be way better. So it might have been a bit of a greedy play. Often keeping the dragon back and keeping an arsenal is just much better. There's another rake committed. So third rake now. Yeah, so really hit on the rake / Azraeli kind of race. But yeah, this is awkward. I mean, this rake is good here. Like in theory, like I mean, it is pretty good here. It's kind of the hardest thing for us to deal with in this situation. We're going to get left with... Yeah. Dragon's cleared up, but obviously we get left with Yindarai. No counter on it now, but 3 health. So I know I need to kill dragons here, otherwise it's just kind of free for him to clear up the Yindarai and also do whatever he needs to next turn. But like, really awkward. It's not a good spot to be in. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough here. I think the best player is probably just pitch a red and a blue, point a blue at an Ashwing. It feels bad, right? Like throwing these big attacks, but you honestly, like just controlling dragons is the most important thing, especially when you have a lead. Like I'm not in a position where I need to present damage. Like I'm going to win this game through the Ash advantage I have and the kind of the tempo and dragon advantage that I've had. So let's just take care of one of these Ashwings, I think, probably by pitching a blue and a red and then hustling a card that we want to keep, which would be a dust up because I'll just keep CNC in the deck as a hopper in a late game. Yep, so pitching the CNC and the Centipede, playing out the Chimera, cleaning up a dragon, which honestly does feel weird, right? But you're going to get awkward hands like that, and that's just what you've got to do sometimes. And we get to keep that dust up as an answer in Arsenal. Had we kept that Yindarai in hand, we could have had a much better turn. Then we could have played the Yindarai, both Yindarai's could have killed 2 dragons, then we could have pointed the last threat at a dragon and still had an Arsenal card. So, yeah, kind of shows the power of keeping back dragons rather than just playing them out. feels good to develop the board, but often it's not the correct play. It's all about threat management. Semi's a good play here. It's hard to kill. The dragon, a couple of damage. But when we go over to our turn, we're looking at graveyard to see, yeah, we see the 3 rakes, we see Azraeli, we see 1 Necria. And then to us, so we can clear up everything here, which is a great spot to be in. We can dust up probably on the end of the chain to kill that Themi. That's super clean. So it's just about, this is a great time to develop an Uvia because demands to be killed. We have such a great Ash lead. Let's just park this Rake in Arsenal. I think there's a debate between parking the Uvia and the Rake in Arsenal at the end of this because we're going to use the Dust Up in Arsenal to kill Themi. I actually think maybe because he's going to prioritize killing the Uvia here. I actually think maybe keeping the Uvia might have been better. But I think my thought was maybe I could play this Rake out if I just needed to present damage. But here's no Rake for me to counter my Rake with, so I actually think the Uvia is better. So that's probably just one thing I would do differently there. That Uvia rather than the Rake. But, in the time when I'm playing the game, not going through necessarily all of these thought processes. Dust Up kills that. Themi, again, will... this time I think I take the Ashwing this time. It's probably fine because we know there's no rakes left in Azraeli to easily clear up these Ashwings. So we're probably going to be left with an Ashwing. So Yindarai developed for him. Barrier. This Burn has already gotten 4 damage in though. So like I say, just get it out, get it in play, deal the damage that you want to get. Treat it like, a 0 for 4 or a 0 for 6. Usually in that range, especially the first one. Yindarai takes care of a dragon. So exactly, so we made that dragon off the dust up there. It was a great call, great time to make that dragon because it was very likely we're going to get left with it. And now we just have an extra damage, or actually, in fact, we have an Ashwing that can just ping off this Yindarai counter. So sometimes it's correct to make the Ash with dust up. Sometimes it's Ashwing rather. Sometimes it's correct just to hold the Ash. But now we get to clear up his board and present threats without even having to play Rake, which is a great spot to be in. And I can play this Burn Them All pretty much free as well. Nice. So back to us. Yep, we're gonna now get our Burn Them All again. Just gonna get value out of the Burn Them All. We're gonna try and get probably 5 to 6 value damage out of this. And it's basically free to play at this turn. I could do it a little bit differently if I kept it. I could probably develop the Rake and keep another card in Arsenal, but I don't think that's worth the damage we're going to get here, and we're just going to keep the Rake. So we have this Ashwing to take care of the counter on Yindarai, so we don't need those Ashwings, and it's just a bit of a liability. So Azraeli in that deck, no need to get greedy. How you lose this mirror, especially win the mirror by playing tight and not getting greedy, basically. Same when you're ahead, same when you're behind. When you're ahead, you don't play greedy, so you don't get your opponent back in. And when you're behind, you play super tight and not greedy, so that you can just out fundamental them back into the game. I just play a little bit greedy behind. I'll admit that. But in this instance, I decided to develop the Dromai to basically allow us to point the 7 Miraging North damage at the opponent's face. I don't love committing Dromai to the board because it's so easy to kill, but this allows us to point 7 damage. And now life is becoming relevant. Like we're now at that point where actually we can start to use our damage to basically cause them to not be able to keep 4 to 5 card hands and have to block. And when they get to block, they're having to block. That's when we can start to develop dragons even more and making it harder for them to clear, because either they have to take all this damage off things like Metamorph to clear, or they just have to block out, and then it's harder for them to clear off less cards in hand. They're 1 card block there. So for the opponent developing Miraga here, it's going to take care of Dromai nicely and be something that's hard to kill. So thankfully we have Dust Up in hand, which can take care of that Miraga. Depends what else they're going to do. Get that 5th value point off that Burn Them All. Value card. We just love 0 for 4s. We love 0 for 5s. Especially when they block 3 and are starters. And then Dust Up to take care of a dragon. I think making Ashwing would be a mistake here from their side, although it would eat up life. And maybe because of the life total they're on, I'm opting to make the Ashwing here. I think it's really close, to be honest. I think making the Ash might be correct, because the life totals are pretty close, and kind of keep up with Ash, might be able to get this game back to being pretty close in game state where it can you can start to play 0 cost dragons late, or just up, or the rakes you're going to put back in with them. The awkward start to this game has definitely meant that damage has been pointed at and damage has been taken. Sometimes both players get pretty good starts and you're just there clearing dragons and no one's really getting damage pointed at them because the dragon's the priority. There's some awkward hands for, I would say both sides, but mostly my opponent, especially in those first 3 turns, meant that damage actually got through. So we've got the trap card, we've got Tumultai. Definitely won't be playing that here, although I'm sure I'm considering is there a way to get into play. But this is probably a time I'm going to develop a Rake, I think. Then we can potentially Arsenal another Rake, even if he has Azraeli, then develop the next Rake, and the only answer to that is the last Azraeli. But yeah, it looks like I'm going to do that, but I'm going to not keep the Rake. I'm going to keep the Dust Up, I think, and ask. Okay, I think I'm just going for the least greedy play possible here, which is basically clear up the board and then just pitch to Furnace, which is the least greedy play, which I said before is the way to win the game, right? Keep the greed to a minimum. Because actually, if we played the Rake here, we couldn't have also Mirror Guide, so we'd have to just Dust Up, and that's not particularly good. So this line's much better. Get rid of that card. We don't want Tumultai. Don't need it. Don't need it in this situation. Just play greedy, play tight. Very likely I'm going to Rake on the next. I decide to block here. Can't see stuff blocking here. I mean, this is going to kill Mirror Guy, actually. That's the great thing as well. Once you start to develop the board and these 4 toughness dragons, it means they have to point the Kailoria at you. I love 3 Thermai. Like, it's obviously great against Icelander and Kano, but it's also fantastic in this matchup because it's so hard to kill. The Kailoria clean up the Mirror Guy there. We can blow, presumably clean up my last Ashwing, throw him some Ash. But this is the great thing. We've got these Ashwings on board, just taking 3 damage away from. Like, it's basically gaining us 3 life. That Ashwing that we made, a few turns ago. That Dust Up. And it took a Yinrai counter off, so it basically got us a card plus 3 life. Huge Ashwing for us. I think we get to develop 2 dragons here, but this is actually a turn where Rake would make a lot of sense, just from a resource standpoint. We could pitch a red to Rake, and then we could just pitch the Remembrance to play Thermai, and keep either a Thermai, a Chromai, and Arsenal. Or we could just play everything out on board. We're a bit greedy, to be honest. It might be the way we're going to lose the game. We commit all our dragons to the board. We commit Chromai, a Thermai, and a Rake. But if he then has like Azraeli, Uvia, and Dust Up, for instance, pretty bad for us. He clears the whole board. He gets to the left with a Chromai on board. Sorry, an Azraeli rather. And if we draw a dud hand, that's actually just immediately he's back in the game. Immediately back in the game. I actually don't remember what I do here, but definitely tanking on it for a while. I assume I'm going to leave the Chromai now. I assume I'm going to play Rake, ping off the Kailoria, leave a dragon back, play the Thermai off the Remembrance, attack for 3 in 1, pressure on the board, and then still keep this Chromai as a response dragon to clean up whatever he does on his. Mitigating again, playing tight, mitigating risk. Alright, so dragons clean up the Kailoria here. Ashwing. You can make graveyard. I don't need to remember. Know that I've still got up on the Azraeli Rake count versus him, and I haven't even remembered it, so it's fine. And this is the second Remembrance I've seen, so I'm still going to see the third one. I can just make sure I play the third one out. Or not. Okay. I don't know about this play, actually. Now I see it in hindsight. I think this Remembrance... I guess my thought is because he's so low on life here, I have 3 really good targets. I can get back Rake, Azraeli. Well, no, it would be Rake, Azraeli, and probably Necreer. I think I have Azraeli. And it just means my threat density on my draw is so high. Because I've got the 3 Rake, the 3 Azraeli, Necreer is a great play. But I just wonder if it's a little bit greedy. I think maybe even the Chromai might have been better. Because there's only the second Remembrance I've seen. I'm trying to think back now. On the first turn, which we pitched. Yeah, so we would draw the third one. That would shuffle the deck afterwards. So to make sure we don't have a deck. To be honest, just getting damage here is probably pretty good. So okay, we do have 2 Azraeli, so it's a pretty clean pickup. I mean, our threat density is high. Azrael just primes our deck back with more Azraels in there so that if he remembers the rakes, we've got answers, but also there's so much Ash, and just starts to play out 0 cost that thing and deal more arcane damage. I don't like not having Dromai. We get pretty rewarded. We get a hand that has both Rake, Azrael, and a Ravenous Rebel. Kind of has everything you need to do anything they might present. But, you know, if I draw in double blue, multi, and stud, great. It's just double blue Tumultuar sounds exciting. It's not particularly exciting. And they might have 2 or 3 dragons on the board. So the Stemai, you can see how hard to kill the Stemai is. It actually means that the way I look at it, so Azrael has 4 damage effectively, 2 plus 2 arcane pings. The Mirage guy's 2, so that's 6. He's got 6 damage. We have 7 toughness on the board with the 3 dragons and the Themai. So the 4th toughness on Themai is meaning that a dragon's going to stay behind. We're going to get to keep an Ash Wing on this turn. So it points to 2 arcane at 2 Ash Wings, and Mirage and Azrael is physical at Themai. And presumably has an Arsenal card, or is going to, yeah, because he would have pointed the damage, dusted up, if he'd like a dust up. But yeah, we're going to get left with an Ash Wing, which is going to help us clean up his 4 toughness dragon potential. Okay. So, Rebel here, point this at the Mirage, because if we hit a blue here, that means that we can still play Rake and Azrael and clean up the whole board. But if we hit the red here, which Ravenous Rebel reveal, Ravenous Rebel, obviously, my Ravenous Rebels only hit Ravenous Rebels, means we only have to commit the Rake here, and then keep an Azrael and Arsenal. But if we hit a blue, we'd have to commit the whole board. So just play the Rebel first, point it at the Themai, see what we, or the Mirage, sorry, see what we get out of it, and then hopefully we keep a card in Arsenal, which is exactly what we do. Azrael, put it down to 2. And then, yes, there's Azrael left in his deck, which is fine. But we have an Azrael in our arsenal. Furthermore's just ticking away, getting value. We're just slowly starting to chip away life now. And we're going to get to 0.1 damage here. So we're going to end up with 4 dragons on the table. Like, this basically, this has to be an Azrael. Otherwise, we're so far ahead. And because we've just remembrance to keep our 3 Azrael, 3 Rake in the deck, even if he responds with an Azrael, like, we still have 2 more Rakes to draw. We still have this Azrael in arsenal. We still have kind of all the tempo after that. Like, we might take a bit of damage because Azrael would clear out 3. Arsenal Azrael, back over to them. Just keeping those fundamentals, right? No reason to play that dragon out there. Yes, it represents potentially 3 extra damage, but that's not relevant. Like, we're gonna win this game without that. That's not what we need to win this game. Like, we're so far ahead. We just need to control and not be greedy. Having the answer in Arsenal to them starting to develop a board is exactly what we want. So that's what we kind of want to do for the rest of the game now until lethal. Wow, like, such an awkward hand for them here. I assume they've probably got a sigil, but Metamorph just has to come in and I mean, there's an argument you just pointed at the opponent, and then yeah, which is what's being done here. Like, you just have to point at the opponent, see how bad Warmongers is in this matchup, point at the opponent, then hopefully draw an Azrael next turn to clean up the Rake. But are you going to take 4 damage from this? I think the Azrael there, or an Uvia, and not having put Rakes back into the deck is really relevant. So I just go ahead and block for 3. We see that Remembrance come out. So this can be good because that now for our opponent means they can put Rakes / Azraelites back in the deck to deal. Azraelites definitely by the first target, but also Rakes to deal with what's going on. But I had a dead card there. I can just Necria plus play this Ravenous Rebel, continue to present damage, keep an Azrael in arsenal. So off Remembrance, they got back Azrael, Rake, and an Azrael. 2 Azraelites and a Rake. Sigil, gaining that 3 life back. Alright, start the turn, we play our Ravenous Rebel, just presenting damage. Never missing. Never missing. Nice when you just have the 6 blues. You really don't need them in this matchup. The blues are there to play your Necrias. No other reason this matchup. Like I say, Tumultuar is such a trap. So forcing them into an awkward spot where they have to end up blocking with this Metamorph just to preserve life. We get to play Necria, which now, sorry, Dominia rather, to block with. And yeah, we'll attack 4 times. If they have a Popper here, that's great for them. If they have Popper into Azrael, like, that is good. But then we still have a Necria to deal with. And then we still have the Azrael now. So, here, attack with everything. So they take 4 from the dragons there. And then I do think about this Necria for a split second. Because they've just taken 4. If they held the Popper just to deal with the Necria and took 4 damage for it, I'm all down for that. Like, they'd have to have the Popper for the Necria, plus the Azrael, be in a good position, and they've taken all the damage to do it. And then they're going to have 4-card hand, get to play our own Azrael on the way back, and they still have to deal with the last Ashwing. Great spot to be in. So yeah, I mean, he does have the popper, but that's fine. Like, the card taken from there, plus the card he blocked with, so go 3-card hand. All the while, Burn Them All continues to pick them up and deal damage. And our 8-life lead, we're like a 5 Ash lead, plus we have passing back with our card and us. So passing back, they have Uvia on Azrael, so that's fine. Although that is something that's going to help, at least stabilize the board a little bit, and it's going to be hard for us to kill. We're going to mean we have to commit our whole hand here with. I mean, we can kill it with just a Rake and Azrael, and clear up the dragon that they make as well. Depends if this last card is a dragon as well. If this is something like a Miragai or Alori or something, Yindarai would be amazing. But if it's not, then we don't even have to play both Azrael out. Any good targets for Remembrance here, so I think that's just what I'm pondering on, is do we play the Remembrance, pitch the Sigil, or do we play the Sigil and pitch the Remembrance? Honestly, I think either's fine. I think just probably getting the Sigil out, there's not great Remembrance targets, and if for some reason we do come back to seeing that Remembrance third cycle, effective cycle, I guess, then, we've made the better play by getting the Sigil out now. Density's so high of threats in the deck. I don't think that's going to happen. Yep, so we get to use effectively 2 cards plus the pitch here. Clear out board. The first 2 Ashwings come in that we had previously left over that couldn't be cleared. And then now we get to develop the Rake, kill the Uvia, and still point 2 damage at them as well. So, ideal spot. I mean, they really need to have the Azrael. Chipping away. So do end up playing the Remembrance here by the looks of it. In the middle line rather than the Sigil. Honestly, I think either's fine. You could play the Sigil there and pitch the Remembrance. You could pitch the Remembrance and play the Sigil. But, we are going a little bit lower on Ash here. And so to keep the Ash kind of levels higher, I think pitching the red is terrible. Just means that, just again, kind of closing down the angles on how they could get the Ash advantage back and potentially get back into the game. And we've just played a Rake. So that's at least one target. And we can just get, like, Metamorphs. We just damage our deck. Put down to 5. We'll play the Remembrance. Probably the 2 Rakes. And Dromai is a reasonable pick as well, but one way they can get back into the game is Ash, so probably better off just getting the damage card. Yep, so we get back the Metamorph. Arsenal that Azrael, back to them. So we're going to get one more turn out of this Burn Them All as well. So we're going to get 6 damage out of it because we did blank on one attack. Damage from our 0 cost is good. Oh, no Azrael. I mean, this is a little bit unlucky, I think, not seeing Azrael on any of these 3 turns, and instead having to just commit a bunch of 0-cost dragons here. But using dragons to clear Ash, finally they flip an Azrael off this Raven's Rival, so we know that's coming next turn. Raven's Rival cleans up another Ashwing. 5 now, so they have to, but honestly, this Azrael isn't going to matter now because we've just got so much damage here. So, yeah, we're going to clean up the dragons, present a little bit of damage. Lose the Burn Them All this turn. We probably keep. We need to deal 7 effective damage here. 6, sorry. We have 3 Ashwings and a Yindarai. We don't have to play the Dromai here. Sorry, we don't have to play the Azrael. We just keep the Azrael, play the Dromai out. Right. Assume Dromai probably goes. Oh, no point in putting Dromai at face. I was on point the Yindarai at face. But we developed the Dromai and the Yindarai. We could have just attacked with the Dromai first, actually. Probably didn't need to actually develop the Yindarai at the same time. Confirmation. We need the action point. But I guess it doesn't really matter. We're going to get the action point by clearing a dragon. There's no opportunity for the opponent to interact anyway, so take care of the Miragai with the Dromai and a dragon. 2 dragons. And clean up the Dromai, and we can just free to attack with the Yindarai. Even if they have the popper there. Actually, I think, I think better play here, actually, be to Yindarai the Dromai. Just not open ourselves up to a popper on Yindarai, because it is super hard to kill. And with Azrael, the Azrael has to kill the dragons. You probably get left with the Yindarai, or at least a couple of dragons, if not. So, what I decide. So I think I should have attacked the Yindarai the Dromai. We lose 1 life, like we deal 1 less damage, but it just means that even if they have the popper, like we're just in a much better position. As always, very contextual. I don't know if I checked the graveyard to see. I think they still have one, and it was pitched and then shuffled. Okay, so the furnace block comes out here just to prevent damage. We're left with a sigil, 3 ash up, so I think either pitching this to furnace or just playing it, either is fine. Okay, so here's me clearing just the burn them all trigger. So we do actually get one more burn them all. So it's going to do 7 damage total. So very powerful cost. And honestly, if they'd had the Nullring gloves here, like they could not be affording to pitch resources to that. That would be more damage taken from the attacks, or they would be clearing back. Yep, Azrael comes down, which we obviously knew about from the Ravenous Rebel. Gonna clean up with the Dromai and then 2 Ashwings. So Azrael on the board, 4 cards for them. The power of Azrael, like, it is super scary, and it's why you do have to play super tight, even when you're so far ahead, because, you know, yeah, a Rake here. Like, if we'd just played it at Azrael at some point, like, super punished for this. They have Rake, they have Azrael, they have another Dragon on the board, for instance. We have nothing. They could clear everything here, and then we draw a dud hand. Like, we could just, they could be immediately back in the game. So, playing tight, not getting greedy is exactly how you just kind of close these games out. I'm glad we have kind of seen this game to illustrate that. Not making this place. So, an Ashwing's going to come in at the end right here, clean that up, and then see if they pinpoint damage at us, plus have another threat to kill off the Enderai. They're playing its Popper here a little bit, but I think at this point, definitely have to. I think we're talking about, obviously, opportunity on time skippers this game with the awkward opening hand. This is interesting, like pitching the sigil there. I might have played the sigil because, you know, an Azrael plus a burn them all puts you to 1 here. Makes it pretty tough. So I think I might have played that sigil. Obviously, you know, not having Ash is pretty bad, but maybe they just have to. Maybe they just have to make the Ash there. So far behind on it. But I've, you know, been sitting on this Azrael, sitting up for so long that it's finally gonna come out and do exactly what we needed to here, and then basically mean that clear the whole board and present lethal. Like, you know, they kind of need the Popper here. So Azrael comes in. I point the Arcane at him because we just present lethal and I have enough of the dragons. I don't need to point the extra Arcane damage at the Ashwing. And then he pitches. Spend that, which is fine. Has the yellow to prevent the pitch, but that's resources he's not going to spend on his turn. Good spot to be in. And then we can develop the Rake. And I actually think we can just pitch Furnace Uvia probably. Just have a bunch of threats on board that are hard to kill and be presenting lethal damage here. Uvia should clean up this last Ashwing and then point 3 damage worth them. And then we have Uvia, 3 dragons, Azrael. So we're going to be left with dragons after this turn. No way they can clean it up. So even if we kind of have a bit of a... So Uvia should have cleaned up that last dragon just to play around the Popper, but fine. Always point your best dragons at their dragons and Ashwings at them if you can to make sure you're not playing to Poppers. And just putting in the damage here. Then not blocking with the sink below on 1 Ashwing, taking the other 2. Dromai's going to come in. And they just point a Furnace, put the Furnace in front of it. Then they're at 1. Oh, they've got a Sigil. Okay, that makes sense. Sigil comes out, puts them back to 4. But now they have 2 cards in hand, and we have Enderai, Uvia, Azrael, still 2 Ash, and the Ashwing. Back over to this turn. Dust up. And basically, the game is basically over. Gonna see dust up come in and clear. Plus, obviously, Popper here would be the card that can buy them another turn. Pop can always be scary, especially in this part of the game. Like, this is why you want to keep CNCs in the deck, I think, rather than always play them or block with them early. Keep them for late for good. Potentially kind of swing the game back in your favor. Might be a little bit far apart now. There's definitely turns where the Pop would have been super, super good. Okay, so basically, long story short, for this end of this game, they don't have the Popper. We get to run through with lethal damage, forcing out the cards in their hand. Going through. And to this point in the last game, last part of the game, where we then have this. We just attack for this even more Centipede for lethal. Yep, even more Centipede comes in for lethal. So there you have it. That's lethal. Right, that's going to do it for this first in this masterclass series here on Arsenal Pass. Looking at the Dromai Mirror in this one of my favorite matchups in Classic Constructed right now. And I think you got to a lot of the fundamentals that we talked about in that game. You know, the idea of really controlling the board state, getting ahead on Ash, dealing with dragons, keeping an Arsenal card, you know, that's relevant to the board, either as a threat or a clearer, a way to deal with their best dragons. The power of Necreer in that matchup. Remembrance, the game didn't come down to Remembrance, but that really came down to kind of how the early turns played out and damage getting exchanged. But there are other games where all your damage that could be pointed at their face or all the attack actions has to go at the dragons to clear, and your opponent's doing vice versa. You know, play one dragon, play an attack action. They play one dragon, play an attack action, and go back and forth this way. So, yeah, Remembrance can definitely be super relevant, especially in grindier matchups. Maybe a little bit less relevant, I guess, against the more attack actions that come into it. So, yeah, that'll do it. Love to hear some feedback on this series. Is it something you want to see more of, more in-depth matchup analysis and kind of tips and tricks on how to play different matchups? Maybe more for Dromai. Could be for other decks that you want to see as well. So drop us in the comments below. Let us know what matchups you'd like to see us cover, especially if the decks that we are, you know, experts, or if I say experts, but pseudo, you know, decks that we play at least, can give some guidance and direction on. And otherwise, if you aren't already, sub to the channel, drop us a like on the video and appreciate it. Until next video.